Subscribing to The Observer on YouTube couldn't be easier, and we're going to show you exactly how to do that. First, navigate to www.youtube.com/theobservernj. Once you get there, all you need to do is hit the subscribe button. Next to the subscribe button, click the down arrow and then all. And that's it. You're subscribed, and now anytime The Observer is live, you will be notified.
You can now listen to the Observer Live podcast in languages other than English. Here's how. First, click on the Settings tab right here. Then, look up for audio track and click on that. Then, scroll around for different languages, find the one that you want to hear everything in, and click on it. And it's that simple. Now you can listen to everything in the language of your choice on the Observer Live podcast.
Hi again, everybody. It's Kevin Canessa coming to you live from the newsroom of The Observer and TheObserver.com on this, the 23rd day of July in the year 2026. Sure hope you're enjoying your Thursdays, no matter where it is you are in the country. Here in the Northeast, it is 79 degrees. Felt like kind of like an autumny day this morning out there. So hope you're enjoying this beautiful day, no matter where it is you are. There are a couple of things that I want to get to today that I didn't know about when we did our live broadcast on Tuesday. But the first thing I want to start off with is something that is going on right now in the township of Edison, New Jersey. And this was brought to my attention last night that in Edison, which I want to make this perfectly clear, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison in many ways because the population of Edison is about 110,000 residents, and we have about 40,000 here in Kearny. So we're talking about a town or a municipality that's 2.5 times the size of the town of Kearny. But recently, they had a similar situation to what we had right here in Kearny, where they had to propose their budget and introduce it and adopt it, but they didn't. And you may recall over the last couple of weeks when Kearny was going through the whole process of adopting its budget, that people were like, well, what happens if the budget doesn't get introduced and then ultimately adopted? And there were a lot of question marks about what would happen in Kearny if that happened. But fortunately, by a vote of 5-4, the budget did pass. But I just want to put up on the screen here to you, for you to see what is going on right now in Edison. And these are just some of the things that they've had to adopt in Edison because their budget has not been adopted. The first thing, there are 360, as of now, public safety furloughs. That means that there are firefighters and there are police officers who have basically been laid off for the time being. And when you think about that, that's a huge number. So take 2.5 times away from that, and you still, if you applied it to the town of Kearny, would be coming up with a pretty large number of layoffs that would have had to get put into effect if the town didn't adopt its budget when it did last week. All summer camps and summer programs that are taking place in Edison have been suspended for the time being. So when you look around here, there are playground camps here. There are activities all summer long. If the town of Kearny had not adopted its budget when it did last week, all types of summer camp programs and summer programs could have been suspended. You know, the movie in the park last night, that would possibly have been suspended from happening because when you don't adopt a budget, you don't have money to pay people and do things, and it becomes a problem. The Splash Park was closed in Edison. Now, this is not necessarily a good comparison because the one that we have in Kearny is a county park, but parks would have been affected by it. Playgrounds, all playground programs would have been suspended and closed. If the town recreation center was open right now, which it is not yet because they're still working on renovations, it would have had to have been closed. Now, this is a big one. If you've ever had to get permits, you know that the process for building or for whatever it is that you're doing, any type of work that you're doing in the town, it's a very difficult process to have to go through. In Edison right now, they have closed the permits offices, and no one is able to get a permit as a resident of the township of Edison. Now, just think about what that would have been like if something like that were to have happened here. I'll tell you what, a difficult process as it is when things are going smoothly. Could you imagine if it were impossible to get them here right now? So, what's the point of all this? I guess it's really just to illustrate that when you don't adopt a budget, even if that budget comes with it a 14.12% tax increase, which again, I'm not trying to downplay that. I want that to be very, very clear. A lot of difficult decisions had to be made when you have to raise taxes by that amount of that type of percentage. But the consequences of not doing so are sometimes much, much worse than what would happen if you do. And that's what Edison is facing. What is probably most perplexing about what happened in Edison is how it got to this point. Because I was speaking with a dear friend of mine last night, and from what it seems was that they hadn't had a meeting in the month of June, or if they did, there was no minutes of it, so there was no way to tell why they got to this point and how they got to this point. And so could you imagine what it must be like now to live in Edison and have all these different things that you can't do and you can't get through because somebody dropped the ball somewhere. So look at those things. The biggest issue that I see there, though, is the layoffs and furlough of public safety people. I don't understand and never could understand why in any type of municipality, for whatever the reason, laying off public safety, whether it's fire or police officers. And this number, 360 in Edison, is just astronomical. And it would have been a big number in Kearny if that ever had to happen. And I believe the way they do that is they go most recent on first to go. So it would have been a lot of the younger people who are just getting started in their careers. What a horrible, horrible situation that is. So we'll keep our eye on what's going on in Edison and how they actually got there. But I wanted to bring it to your attention in case you didn't see it in larger news outlets, because it's really, really unbelievable that this stuff happened there. But this is what would have happened if the vote had gone 5-4 against Kearny's budget. We would be talking about a substantial amount of layoffs on all these programs being canceled, and I don't think there's anybody in this town who would have been too happy about that, to say the very least. Now, yesterday I got a text message from Sergeant John Fabula of the Kearny Police Department, and he asked me a question about whether I thought it would be wise to announce a cold case right now, given that a lot of things have been going on in the area. You all know what happened last weekend in North Arlington, and the reason John asked that was because there is a cold case that he has been working on and that he needs people to offer tips with. So let me just explain this a little bit to you if I can. The person you see here is Nicholas Miscucci. At the time of his disappearance, which was September 18th, 1974, 51 years ago, almost 52 years ago, and it also happened to be 3 days before I was born, believe it or not. Nicholas Miscucci, a 60-year-old man who lived in the town of Kearny, disappeared and was never heard from or never again seen by anybody in his family. And the mystery of his disappearance was never really solved. And thanks to some urging from people, I believe, in Nicholas's family, Detective Sergeant John Fabula has reopened the case. And the hope here is that maybe somebody who is a little bit older, if you're thinking about this, if you were born around that same time, you're 51 years of age right now, or 52, that there may be some people who, as they're getting older, may have known something about this case and were afraid to say anything about it. And now, as they get older, they might be feeling, a little bit of their own mortality and might be more willing to share information about what's going on. So here's the situation. When he disappeared, the belief was that he was on his way to a meeting in Brooklyn. And when you think about that, God only knows what he was going over to Brooklyn for. If you do a Google search on the man's name, you're going to find a lot of things about him. I'm not going to get into any of that, but there's plenty of information out there that you can read on your own if you search his name, and you'll figure out there's a belief that he had a not so wonderful past, I guess, but that's for you to decide. I don't want to get into any of that. And when he disappeared, there have been rumors, of course, for years. Some people have said that I've seen a documentary on YouTube that said at one point maybe that this guy was diving in the East River looking for a body in a trunk. They tried to connect it somehow to that. I don't know how or why, but that's what is going on right here, and it's been happening for 51 years. They've never found him. And again, it's not about anything that he was involved in his life. We don't know for sure, and I think there's a lot of people who would say maybe some of the things that are out there on the internet are not even correct. But the bottom line is his family, including his daughter, who I understand is possibly even watching us right now, would like to know what happened to her dad. And who wouldn't? You think about what happened recently with Savannah Guthrie, how her mother disappeared, and now we're talking months of not knowing anything. How about going on 51, almost 52 years of not knowing what happened to your father? It's utterly heartbreaking. It really is when you think about it. And it might be a great thing for the family if they're ever able to get that closure that they were never able to get because this case couldn't be solved. So John Fabula will be away for a couple of weeks. When he comes back, he's going to tackle this case. If you are one of those people and you happen to be watching this video right now and may know something about Nick Miscucci, Nicky, they said his nickname was, I'm asking you to make the phone call. There is a tip line that the Kearny Police Department recently opened, and I have it up on the screen right now, 201-283-5656, 201-283-5656. Pick up the phone, leave a message for John, and let him know what you think you know. And even if it turns out to be inaccurate, it doesn't matter. If you think you might have that information, pick up the phone and make the call. You can remain anonymous. You don't have to tell anybody who you are. That is important to know, because sometimes in cases like this, people don't want to talk because they're afraid of retribution, of knowing who was the person who spoke. And this, of course, is why so often so many crimes are not solved, because people know and don't speak up. Let me give you a little bit of background a little bit more about Nick Miscucci. He was born December 3rd, 1913. He was approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall to 5 feet 9 inches tall. He weighed about 210 pounds. At the time of his disappearance, he had gray hair, was beginning to bald, with a blue eye. He had one fake eye in his right eye, and he wore eyeglasses with bifocals. And most people who knew him called him Nicky. So I want you to, if you're watching this and you may know something about this, call Detective Fabula or call that tip line. 51 years plus is a long time to have to live without knowing what happened to this man. And if you know something and you can bring this case to a conclusion, you will be doing some really, really good for the family that survives Mr. Miscucci. That is it for this broadcast. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Let's hope we get some answers here. If you have any ideas, make sure you share them. You can also send an email to anonymously to tips@kearnynjpd.org. tips@kearnynjpd.org. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your Thursday. We'll see you back here next time, which will probably be Tuesday, unless some kind of news breaks between now and then. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Bye-bye.